Welcome to As the Story Grows. I'm Brian Patton. Today we welcome Mike Ricketts from Planes Mistaken for Stars to the podcast. Planes released their new record, Do You Still Love Me, last Friday on Deathwish Inc. I wrote about the impact Planes Mistaken for Stars had on me and shared a playlist of Screamo/emo violence track on the mailing list a few weeks ago, which you can find by clicking the Substack link in the show notes. Mike talks about his drumming education, the origin of the band's name, moving the band to Denver, the hiatus and reunion, the untimely passing of Gared, and Gared's influence on the new record, plus a lot more. Planes is a band I love, and I'm so grateful I got to have this conversation with Mike. Things get emotional at the end, and that's to be expected when you lose such a key member of your band. But I'm grateful for Mike's honesty and openness in this conversation, and I think you guys are really going to enjoy it. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of As the Story Grows. If you're brand new to the podcast, welcome. Thanks for checking this show out. Like I said, you can find links in our show notes or over at asthestorygrows.com to our podcast community on Discord, for our mailing list on Substack, or you can support the show financially on Patreon. And if you think somebody might like this episode, I would love it if you shared it with them. I hope everyone enjoys today's conversation with Mike Ricketts from Planes Mistaken for Stars. Are you still in Colorado?
No, I'm actually in Chicago.
Okay.
Yeah.
What took you to Chicago? Just work?
No. Initially, it was family.
Okay.
My mom wasn't well at the time. So I moved to Chicago back in 2008. Okay. But yeah.
Gotcha. Peoria is like, how far is Peoria from Chicago?
It's about 2.5 hours south.
Okay.
Yeah, so like mid-state.
Okay. So it's like roughly in the geographical region you grew up with, roughly.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's the thing. Like, I was in Denver, and I didn't want to like my mom wasn't well, and she wasn't like to the point where I had to like care for her every day. But it was the point where like I wanted to be within driving distance. Yeah. You know what I mean? So I was like, Chicago is a lot more fun than Peoria, so I decided to go to Chicago. You know?
Yeah. That fear of like, you might be in your last years with someone, and it's like, all right, I gotta be near them.
Yeah.
What was growing up in Peoria like?
Oh man. So I actually grew up like outside of Peoria in a town called Morton.
Okay.
So, and Morton is a very different vibe from the city of Peoria. Yeah. Because it was a very like, Christian white farming community. And Peoria was very much like, there are bad parts of Peoria. Like Richard Pryor is from Peoria, and like, so the south side of Peoria is, a lot different than Morton, Illinois. Yeah. But even though they're only like 10 minutes away from each other. Nice. I don't know. It was like enough of a city to have like a small music scene, and to find some cool, fun things to do every once in a while. But we did a lot of hanging out in parking lots. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like in that era, like the pre-cell phone, pre-big internet, there's a lot more just like, I don't know, what are you and your friends doing? Going to the mall and getting in trouble and trying to like skateboard shit, right? Like
totally. Yeah. Buy a fucking 2-liter Mountain Dew and like just drive around town.
Yeah. What got you into music?
Oh man, I've been listening to music since I was a kid. My mom was one of those people who kind of always had like classical music, like the classical radio station playing on in the background. And so, she always had classical music playing, and we had a piano at the house. So she forced me and my brother to take piano lessons from 3rd grade to 6th grade. And then once 6th grade rolled around, she had us join band, and and the requirement was you spend 1 year in band. If you hate it, then you can quit. Both me and my brother chose drums, and we loved it. So we just stayed in band, and yeah, like so, like that. In going into high school, man, I was in marching band, snare line. I was in basketball band. I was in the orchestra. I was in like just jazz band. I did everything. And eventually learned how to play drum set and other things as well. And I was actually a music major in my first year of college, music education. So I did like the 4-mallet marimba and like timpani and all that percussive stuff and the jazz bands and stuff. Nice. So I don't know, man. And I took like, drum set lessons when I was in high school as well, just to learn rock and roll. Played in a lot of cover bands and some, original stuff too in high school, and then ran into the Plains guys. They were located in Peoria, so they were like 10 minutes away.
Yeah.
But I started hanging out in that scene, going to shows and met those dudes, and and then it kind of just took off from there. So,
was that a kind of difficult transition from like kind of more of a classically trained drummer into something more chaotic and just like with feeling?
Not really, like, cause like I had always like, in high school and shit, I was really into like heavy music, like, but it was like, the kind of the cookie cutter heavy music, like Soundgarden and Alice in Chains and all the grunge shit from the 90s and Nirvana. So I was into heavy music already, and I liked playing it. It was more like the discovery of like when I met like the Plains dudes, they were all listening to shit like, the Misfits and fucking Black Flag and like Lifetime and like more kind of like the punk rock side of shit.
Yeah.
And also like metal, like some buddies from that same scene were also like listening to like Neurosis and like just like fucking heavy, fast shit. Yeah. And I just gravitated towards that and wanted to play it. So when I met the Plains dudes, it was like a natural fit.
Nice. Yeah. Were you going to the Peoria scene to like go to shows or
every once in a while? Like most of that, like I was that was kind of my college days. So I was located in Champaign-Urbana for those years, which also had a killer music scene. A lot of good bands played through there. So that was kind of, I saw most of my shows in Champaign-Urbana, but would also like when I was home for the weekends. And during the summers and stuff between, the semesters, I would go to Peoria to see shows and hang out with those dudes in their shitty little house.
Yeah. I'm very familiar with the, I guess the emo side of the Chicago Champaign Peoria scene, right? Bands like
Gared and
American Football and jazz, all that shit. Less so with like outside of Plains, like the heavy music. Was there kind of a good scene for heavy music at that time there as well? Or
I mean, Hum was like, and they were fantastic. But other than that, locally, I probably not as much. I feel like I kind of had to explore like more like, recorded music. I remember Hot Water Music came through. That was, pretty heavy for the time, like Feel for the Hate Game and all that shit. But I had to search out like probably those types of shows and started being able to see more of that stuff after we hit the road and started playing like hardcore shows and metal shows and stuff. House shows. When
Plains is getting started, I mean, did that music kind of just come naturally out of, the guys performing it? Like, I don't know, like, what was influencing you? You talked about what everybody was listening to, but like, you sound like none of those bands.
Totally. Yeah. So Gared and Matt, and our old bass player, Jamie, were in a band called Dismiss, in high school that was like very like pop punky. So like, think like Lifetime kind of style, like real fast and frantic and like, screamy, but has some melody, and then, I think, and the way the Plains formed was like Matt went to like a recording school, Jamie wasn't around, and like so Gared kind of didn't have a band anymore. And me and my friend Aaron Wise were in a band called Keepsake. We were all from Morton, and we were kind of more like, like emo-y, but like heavy kind of, I don't know, kind of like Captain Jazzy or something like that. But it tried to be like, or Braid, tried to be heavy, but like also like quirky. And then, so Aaron and I started playing with Gared, and Gared just had all these fucking ideas for like melodies and songs and frantic guitar parts. So Aaron and I kind of did our best to like latch onto some things and like make them our own and put our own like little spice into it.
Yeah.
And I think and then when Matt came back from recording school, it was just like a natural fit. And that's when we recorded that first EP. And I had already been living in Champaign, and I found a really good studio in Champaign. Brendan Gamble recorded that first EP, and he did a good job in getting some good sounds. And I think that really helped kind of get exposure. Like we had a solid studio to record in that was fairly cheap, and we had some good songs. And I think it was kind of that mix of like, Gared and Matt came from a certain background. Aaron and I came from a certain different background, and like bringing those things together, it just melded into this weird thing. And then, all those different influences kind of just like we're fighting to get to the surface,
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's kind of contributed to like why we sound don't quite have fit into any one category,
Yeah. I've always loved the band name. What was the inspiration for it?
Yeah. So, Planes Mistaken for Stars is essentially Gared was driving up to Chicago to go see a show, I think, and Gared being Gared is always can get somewhat melancholy and has like this mystic side of him. And he basically wished on a star that he saw in the sky. He made like a really heartfelt wish, and then 2 seconds later, he saw that it was blinking and moving. And like the irony of that, I think really kind of stuck with him.
Yeah.
And even though it is kind of a cumbersome band name, it seems kind of apt and appropriate for I think what he was going for with the music. So it kind of stuck. Yeah.
Yeah. What led the band to Deep Elm Records?
So our first tour, we put out that first EP. And literally within like a week of me graduating college, we went on our first West Coast tour with some buddies from Denver called the Blue Ontario, who had members of Christie Front Drive, as well as our good buddy Jason Heller. And so we hit the West Coast, and I don't know if it was that first tour or the second tour, but one of those shows, John from Deep Elm had heard a track and like flew out to come see us play. I want to say in Arizona, and pretty much offered us to put our record out on the spot. And at the time, like we had just been making the CDs ourselves, literally making all the packaging and like folding like paper and like printing stuff out and burning the CDs. So yeah, when he offered to put it out for us and do like a 10-inch vinyl, it was like fuck yeah, let's do it. So that was kind of it. He just offered to work with us and put our music out. And as a beginning band, it was kind of a no-brainer to like, let's do this, get some actual vinyl out and get some promotion and do some more touring. So,
yeah. Was there ever any, I don't know, tension or regret as you like Fuck With Fire comes out and like at that point, the Emo Diaries are like this huge thing, and like I said, you don't sound like any other bands on the label.
Right. I mean, regret from a standpoint of like,
I don't know, or maybe not regret, but maybe just like, maybe this is not the label for us. Like maybe,
so
not finding your scene, not.
Yeah. Definitely when the whole emo thing started to blow up and kind of take on a different like life of its own, like with different like bands that we necessarily weren't into. We made a very conscious effort to try to get as heavy as possible. So that's like Knife in the Marathon is kind of a result of that. And Fuck With Fire is definitely a result of us trying to be as heavy and fast as possible.
Yeah.
And I get why the first EP is considered an emo record, but you got to recognize that at the time, emo was very not defined, right? It was essentially independent music, kids like, screaming and singing their hearts out and doing it their way, right? And then like over time it evolved into this thing that was almost manufactured by Deep Elm Records.
Right.
It kind of took on a life of its own, and we just started not feeling as we didn't feel like we fit into that category. We didn't want to fit into that category. The stuff that we were listening to was a lot heavier and a lot harder and a lot more raw, and we wanted to stay away from any kind of labels, right, as much as possible. So we have no regrets like moving away from that. And I think we did try to often get pigeonholed into it.
Yeah.
Which is fine. People are going to say and do what they want and think what they want about the music. But in the end, I feel like the music has to speak for itself. And if you want to call it emo, you can, but it never was to us, So.
Yeah. Yeah. It always felt more akin to bands like Jerome's Dream or City of Caterpillar and like the screamo scene or whatever, right?
I mean, like we were fucking super like the Swing Kids and all that, the Diego scene and shit too. But yeah, I mean, we toured with City of Caterpillar quite a bit, and we really like connected with bands like that. So
yeah, why did the band end up moving up to Denver?
We wanted to get the hell out of Peoria. Essentially, we were all from there, and we were all living there together in a house and up on a hill in East Peoria. This like pretty much like a communal kind of situation as us and a bunch of our friends. And we had just gone on that West Coast tour, and I think we did an East Coast tour as well. And like I said, we had toured with the Blue Ontario, who were located in Denver, and so we already had like connections there and people that we knew, and Gared had some family living out there as well. And we wanted to kind of not just escape Illinois and go somewhere exciting, kind of like an adventure. But we also wanted to be central, where it would be like easier for us to get to the West Coast, but also like easier for us to get to the East Coast. Maybe not easier to get to the East Coast, but still. Yeah. So the idea was to kind of have a hub where we could tour from, and kind of, make the band kind of our main priority. And it just seemed like a good idea for us to all like, it was that time in our lives in our early 20s where we felt like we needed to like spread our wings and kind of do our own thing and find our own path. And so, yeah, we all, not just the Plains guys, but like many of our other friends from Peoria that lived in that house, we got like a 26-foot moving truck. We loaded all of our shit in there, and it was like a 26-foot moving truck and like 3 or 4 like cars. And we all like just like drove out to Denver together and like set up base, we found a little shitty house on the edge of town and met a lot of great people really in a really short amount of time, and played some amazing shows in a short amount of time. And that the Denver scene was so welcoming to us, and it was like it gave us like new life, and it was such an exciting time, and I feel like we invigorated the Denver scene too by bringing in like some new blood and showing that like, touring bands can be from Denver. And it was just a great time. Yeah. Yeah. Nice. I don't know what else to say about it.
In very quick succession, the band signs with Abacus, Matt leaves the band, you release Mercy, and then you break up. Kind of, was there tension building already that led to that? How much was Matt leaving just like, I don't know, a foundational piece is gone, and so the band felt unstable? Like,
yeah. So, there were a couple years there after Matt left where we, we're definitely trying to figure out kind of our footing. But it was complicated, man, and it was a long time ago. So I'm trying to. So I feel like the first kind of thing that happened that caused a shift in kind of the dynamic and the energy of the band was when Jamie left, and that was in like 2002 or 3, somewhere in there. We'd been touring and started to get some attention from other labels, and And so we had our friend Chuck join the band, and he took over on bass. And so Gared, me, Chuck, and Matt, and we did some tours. And we started doing more like major tours, like opening up for different bands that were, great, but like that type of touring is a lot different than playing house shows and small bars and shit, right? So the dynamic of playing, like opening up for a bigger band in these larger venues was new for us and kind of hard. And that we were definitely touring our asses off. We were trying to do a lot of it. And it became tiresome for not just Matt, but for all of us. At the same time, Matt had started a new band with his wife at the time, called Ghost Buffalo, and he was really into that. And I was into it too. I played drums on that first recording, and it came to a point where he just wanted to like focus on something else besides Planes for a little bit, just like a breather, because we'd been kind of going at it so hard for so long. And so when he left, it came to a point where Planes was getting some opportunities to do some really good shit. Matt couldn't do it, so we got a different guitar player that didn't go over well with Matt, and so things kind of fell apart there. And so we brought on Neil. Neil took over on bass from Chuck, and Chuck moved to guitar, which is kind of his natural instrument anyway. And at that stage too, Gared was like doing a lot of the writing dynamics, and things were kind of, the music was starting to shift away from this like more frantic, like these pieces that kind of evolved. Like they were really short songs, but they were constantly changing and constantly doing freaky like stuff, more like structured like songs, right?
Yeah.
Which you can tell, like if you listen to Mercy, like that album, like you can tell that there's a shift in kind of like, what the songs are like, right?
Yeah.
They're almost like more intentional and more like thought out, and the lyrics like really kind of tie into like the dynamics of the song.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the original question was, but that whole time period was, definitely, led to, I think, some changes in the band and different priorities started to take over. Yeah. And that kind of eventually led to all of us kind of like questioning, like, what we were doing and if we still loved doing what we were doing.
Yeah.
Another thing that led to us, like, what was called at the time breaking up, was the fact that we were like severely in debt, and the label that we signed with Abacus had folded, and they gave us like zero promotion for the record that they had just put out. So there was very little attention paid to it. There's very little tour support, and that shit just gets disheartening, and like, so I think it just came to a head where we all kind of wanted a break. But the recording of that record, of Mercy in Seattle, was one of the best times in the band's history. Take an entire month, go to Seattle, work with Matt Bayless, and just like record a record. It was fun. It was fun. Yeah. But unfortunately, it just didn't get the support that it needed to keep us going as a band.
Yeah. It's such a familiar story. That time in the record industry, I don't know, there's like this emo and then following like a metalcore boom. And it's like everybody brought up all these bands and these labels had huge budgets, and then it like the bottom dropped out, and like all these bands got fucked in the process. It sucked. Yeah. What was the catalyst for then the band starting to play shows again and like maybe thinking you could write new music?
Yeah, Gared's a strong-headed fella, and my intention with it had always been, and I was kind of the guy in the band who was like, maybe it's time we take a step back and like slow down a little bit. And we were going through personal changes. Gared had just gone through a divorce and moved back to Illinois to be closer to his kid or his children. Like I said, my mom was not doing well at the time, and I decided to move to Chicago to be closer with her. And so the kind of the culmination of those two, like us moving away and having a decentralized band, led me to be like, well, let's just like take it easy, and like not tour for a while, and maybe like sit back a little bit, and we'll get back together in a year or two, in a few years, and record some more music. And Gared's attitude, being the headstrong person he was and remained to be, was like, no, fuck that. If we're gonna fucking do this, we're gonna do it like full time, and we're gonna make it happen. We're gonna push forward. So they're like all or nothing. And I was like, well, it's nothing then. And so that was kind of how it ended. But with the understanding that, like, you know, after a couple of years of that goes by, and we're all still friends, we're all still hanging out, we're all still going camping together and talking about music and going to shows. It just was like, and then Gared's like also writing songs for Hawks and Doves. It came to like this thing. It's like, you know, Gared and I had this conversation that was essentially, Gared, I never wanted to stop writing music with you. If you want to like write some more songs with me again, that would be great, you know? And then we did, and we, you know, got offered to play a few shows that would also helped to like, you know, reform kind of our dynamic. And then it was just a no-brainer to like start working on some more songs. And eventually, you know, we put Pray out, which I'm really proud of that record. I think was a really good like return, you know, for after almost a decade of being out of the scene. So what led you guys to Deathwish for that release? We have been you know, with No Idea actually for a while. So I do want to throw out that, you know, we had been supported by the No Idea record label as well in a lot of those intervening years. They re-released a lot of our stuff that was our early material that was on Deep Elm, and we managed to get the rights back from all that stuff and work with No Idea to keep that stuff flowing. And then I think we just kind of wanted to consolidate, and like the guys, we'd known the guys in Converge through, you know, we'd toured with them way back in the 2000s and had played multiple shows with them. We did a tour with them in Japan. And so we had a really great working relationship with Jake and the guys in Deathwish already. You know, I think Gared did most of the talking and kind of conversations around who was going to do what and who we should work with. And it just made sense for us to put that record out with Deathwish at the time. And and we've had a great working relationship with them since. So obviously this next record that's coming out is going to be on that record label as well. It's a long time coming, and we're looking forward to it. But yeah, they've been great to work with.
Now we get to the tragedy that is the passing of Gared, which gets us to this record, Do You Still Love Me? Obviously, this had been in the works that you were working on new material. Did you ever think you were going to release it as, I don't know, in memoriam or as a memorial to honor Gared, or was it just like, well, fuck, our friend is no longer with us, and this is just for us now, right?
Yeah, no, that's a good question, difficult question. I guess the way I'll tackle it is by first saying that way before Gared's diagnosis and after, you know, Pray had been recorded and we'd done small tours here and there, played Fest a couple times, tried to remain active, like playing shows. We were writing songs, and the intention was to put out, you know, another record and to continue to do so for the rest of our lives. You know, every 3 to 5 years, you know, whenever a new record is time where we had enough songs, we'll record it and put it out. And that was kind of how we envisioned, you know, being a band for the rest of our days. And, so we had the songs in the works. We had started writing. We had, Gared, this was before the pandemic, but kind of in the middle of when all that shit was going down. Neil had gone to visit Gared for a couple weeks to help him, like, formulate ideas and really start to like shore up what this record was going to be and what kind of songs were going to be on it. We had about like 3 or 4 like really solid, good songs that we wanted, but we wanted to, we needed some more material. So, and it was difficult, like, Neil and Chuck were in Denver. I was in Chicago. Gared was in Peoria. So we were all kind of separated, and it was hard to practice, right? So the solution was Neil's going to go to Peoria, come up with some material. I would go down there and practice when I could, and we'd finish writing the record. Pandemic hits. Neil gets stuck at Gared's house essentially for an extended period of time. Ends up living there for the next like couple of years, turns out. And so they wrote a lot of material together during that time. Gared was, writing the lyrics for this stuff. They were writing not just plain songs, but they put out the Blunt Razors material, which was like more like slower, pretty stuff. And we had studio time booked with Sanford Parker, and that's kind of in the middle of that writing process was when Gared found out about his diagnosis. So we tried to move the timeline up as much as possible because he was supposed to be starting to get like treatment, radiation, chemotherapy, etc. So yeah, we go into the studio. I lay the drums down, and I think we skipped over the bass because we wanted to get his vocals primarily down as soon as possible because he was going to be getting like radiation treatment on his esophagus and the vocal area. So we didn't know how that was going to impact him. So we got his vocals down first, then his guitars, and then we went back and got like the bass and Chuck's guitars and everything else. And started mixing. But unfortunately, Gared went through a really quick decline. I want to say it was like a little over a year from diagnosis to death. And, obviously during the period leading up to his death, we didn't work much on the mixing because there were more pressing, and things going on. And so when he passed, it did take on this different life. It became more of not necessarily like a memorial, but like it was more just like we wanted to like do him proud, right? Do him right. Make sure that we finished this thing that we had started together, and do it in a way that honored his vision of what it was going to be. Yeah. And so we just did our best, and it was difficult because, we were constantly questioning, like, what would Gared do? Yeah. Situation. What would he want to do? Would he think this is bullshit? Would he think it's stupid? Would he want to hear more of his guitar? Probably. Yeah. So yeah, we just tried to do the best we could to make it not just a good sounding record, but also a product that he would be really proud of. And that would also honor him. We did take some artistic liberties and kind of, this new release that's coming out. There's a version of it, a limited version of it that has this huge like photo book. Essentially, it's like a hardcover photo book of like all this stuff from inside his house. So it's very much a memorial for him and his life and the things he collected, and the things he loved. Can't wait for it to have a hard copy in my hand and put it on my record player.
Yeah, for sure. Was the album Do You Still Love Me Gared's idea and kind of his inception with all the song titles, or was that something you guys put together from the lyrics?
No, yeah. So he wrote all the lyrics. Actually, he wrote almost I think all of the lyrics on this record before his diagnosis. Okay. So there's a lot of this stuff's kind of weird because a lot of it does talk about like death and like existential like kind of mythos, and it's before he even knew that he was had cancer. So it's kind of ironic, but he definitely named all the songs, wrote all the lyrics, and we didn't have to do too much other work for these songs because he was very integral in like the recording process. It was just the last 3/4 to half of the mixing process he wasn't around for. So.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Who did the album artwork and who came up with that concept?
So yeah, that's a great question too. The album artwork, when he was not doing well in his last couple weeks, months, we were still not sure what the artwork would look like for the record. We would bother him, be like, "What do you want this to look like, dude?" And so we'd share ideas, we'd do different things. And one of the things he really liked a lot was this picture of the moon over the lake that a buddy of mine, a really good friend of ours, Keith, took. It was a really is an iPhone picture of the moon over this lake, and it happened to be also the lake that we had Gared's memorial service at, which seemed appropriate. But the photo didn't really do justice to the scene, so we. I'm gonna kill. Is it Danny McCarthy, the artist who we commissioned? I'm not sure if that's the right name or not. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. But yeah, we commissioned an artist to redo that picture, and he did an excellent job.
Yeah. And
I'm kicking myself for not being able to remember his name. I think that might be right, but I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Apologies go out to him, for the work. But that's the idea behind it, and that's where it came from. And,
nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Obviously, this is Gared's last work, the last Plains album. Is it tough to? I mean, it's got to be on some level just tough to release this album, knowing it's his final work before his death. But is it like this, I don't know, exclamation point for the band where you get to put this thing out and honor him, and just I don't know, does it have this sense of finality to it, or have you guys talked about I don't know, what would it look like if we wanted to do this without Gared?
So there's 2 points to this. One, there's a sense of finality to it from the perspective of, we know that this band is never gonna be able to do what we hoped it would be able to do, which is make music together for the rest of our lives and put records out, music out. So there's very much that. Yeah, it's wasn't only the death of a brother and a best friend, but it was the death of the band that we've known for the past 25 years, right? Mm-hmm. So it was tragic.
Yeah.
That said, this is not the last recording. We hope that's going to be coming out. We do have other material. That time period that Neil was working with Gared was very prolific. They recorded so much shit, dude. There's a ton of Gared's guitar parts that have no vocals. There are vocals with no guitar parts.
Nice.
There are there are full songs. There's vocals with guitar, and so we have a lot of material to continue to work with, and that we think would really be cool to put out. And I think the fans would love to hear some of this stuff. Yeah. So we're in the process of recording that right now. We've put drums down already on it. But there's a total of, I want to say 12 to 18 more songs that I'm currently working with. And, there's ideas for how to deal with aspects of those songs that we don't have maybe a vocal line for. Nothing's been decided yet, but we've talked about having guest vocalists come in to help out with that process. As far as playing shows, this has been something that Gared or Neil and Chuck and I have talked about and entertained the idea of trying to at least do one kind of show or one group of shows to play these songs live, but the problem is the logistics, man, trying to figure out how to do that and to honor kind of, how Gared would do it and what it would sound like is intimidating, not just from the logistics standpoint of actually getting people in the room to practice those songs, but also from an emotional standpoint of trying to, what it would be like to play those songs on a stage in front of people without Gared being there is it's fucking hard.
Yeah.
So, it's things that we are definitely continuing to consider, and we're not like writing off. We're not saying it's never going to happen, but we're not in a position right now to make any commitments to do it.
Yeah.
We're kind of taking it one step at a time and seeing how things unfold, seeing how well the record is received. I don't know. People, maybe it flops and people don't want to see it performed live anyway, and that'll solve our problem.
Yeah.
So
I don't know, maybe not interesting. I feel like it's a good time to be releasing music as a band with, a long career. There's, some nostalgia in it. And if you were to do like a festival gig or something, people would fucking fly out and be totally stoked. It's like
there's a lot of bands doing it really successfully, and I'm stoked to see that happening.
Yeah.
It's really refreshing, and to see these bands that we toured with back in the 2000s, who had maybe quit for a little bit, but coming back and like playing shows with people who are really interested in and coming out to see them play again. It's really exciting.